These are some of the greatest impossible AI-generated toilets. Majestic, serene, whimsical water closets. This is a real-time generative AI image generator, but applied to a hologram. Come on. Here's how augmented reality allows the surgeon to look right into the human body before making a cut. And this is an ultra-realistic image-to-video generation. I know, I didn't want to believe it, but if you look really close at the shoulder, you'll see the tiniest bit of distortion, but it's legit not real. This is a parking lot at 4 a.m. where only Waymo self-driving cars come to park, and they got into a bit of a traffic jam. Superbugs are bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics. And now a ChatGPT-like large language model is actually helping us fix that incredibly dangerous problem. TechCrunch deep dived into something that's freaking people out with ChatGPT voice mode. It sometimes screams or hums or grunts in ways that are very unsettling. New breakthrough in AI applied to disease detection. This paper shows 95% accuracy predicting artery disease, type 2 diabetes, and breast cancer. A new artificial intelligence model can actually predict the phase of an X-ray diffracted by a small molecule crystal. And what that means is a big deal, but a little complicated, so I'll explain it later. And finally, Colorado's new Neuro-Privacy laws kicked in 3 days ago, and that could set the stage for a national law, so we're gonna look into it, make sure you know your rights. All right, let's start with the most serene way to go number 2. Let's talk about how if only our greatest moments of intimacy could be our greatest moments of contemplation. These are the most serene, beautiful, and majestic AI-generated toilets that AI can create. Generative models were asked to imagine what is it like to answer the call of nature in nature. I mean, I like this one because it feels like... All right, that one I have no idea how I would get to it. I mean, you'd have to helicopter me in. That one kind of could be workable, but having 2 there isn't quite the privacy I was thinking. Now this one I can imagine. Maybe there's a door right outside the, like cave here, and you got some glass to keep you from falling off the edge. Although the visibility, maybe one-way glass would be a little better for that toilet. I mean, if it was one-way glass, that'd be pretty sick. Ooh, absolutely the worst of them all. First off, I feel like the way that rope's holding it, if you sat on it, it would just bend forward and you'd slide off. Second, even rock climbing, I couldn't imagine doing, but ice climbing with those picks, probably even worse. Wait, why'd they say that? It's giving Rick Sanchez? Is there a planet of floating toilets or something in Rick and Morty? I don't remember. Oh, season 4, episode 2. I haven't seen this one. Oh no, Rick! He just sat on that guy who's sitting on a majestic toilet. All right, moving on. This is a really sick use of generative AI. So you can just draw the shape of whatever vase or however you want to say it on this little whiteboard. And we've seen some technology that would make that into a cool little image, but for the image to actually be all 3-dimensional and then something that's also projected into a hologram with designs and shape, it's just sick. So it looks like it's being projected by LED fans. So if you've ever seen those like super fast spinning LEDs that just have the timing right so that they can generate images because they're spinning so fast, but you can only see the parts that are bright. Makes it look like it's, dimensionally in front of you. But you can see it's just got a mirrored shape. So you can draw the exact shape of the vase that you want. So I just finished reading this book that's called Our Next Reality. And it's written by one of the guys that was like a big part of the VR, revolution over the last decade. And he talked about how important it is for surgeons to use these kind of devices to see inside the body. Because it's just not quite the same looking at video or looking at images. And this video really kind of made me understand what he means. Like, this is what I can imagine a surgeon would really want, especially if it was really built from an MRI or the actual person's brain beforehand. Like bolts that are sticking out the side. But you gotta admit, it's like pretty freaky too. Because like, see these kind of bolts, like Frankenstein-y bolts over here? These, according to this commenter, we do this in neurosurgery. The head is pinned to a frame, pretty brutal. Yeah, I would say so. And it's locked to the table. Then they use CT scans loaded onto the machine, and it's kind of like a mocap because we attach these shiny spheres to this pointer device, and they can pinpoint where the lesions are in the brain. I mean, hopefully it just like put me to sleep if I have to do that. Command Z, no, it doesn't work like that. All right, well, here's a contrarian, though. 99.9% of medical professionals have no freaking clue what to do with this. It's all drummed up and silliness. How does this help? It doesn't. They don't need to be probing around at all. All right, this video is trending on all the social networks. I 100% thought it was real. I saw that it was generated with Gen 3, Runway's Gen 3 image motion model, and I didn't believe it because I've never seen anything quite that realistic. So the shadow from the microphone seems extremely well done. Like it kind of, I guess like where her armpit is here, the shadow seems correct. Over here on the neck, it seems correct. The wispy hair right here seems really correct. Like it almost looks like it got caught kind of in the top part of her shirt. I mean, the neck, the face, this sort of speed of blinking and smiling seems real. But there is the giveaway here. So look at the actual lettering on the background where it's kind of got this bokeh effect. The letter G, the X right here, the U, the L, the E. But you can see here's the actual photograph. You see the word Google that's even on her badge right here? If you look close, you still see the words Google pretty much staying on it, but the badge maybe flops a little bit unrealistically and kind of floats in front of her when she's moving slightly weird there. So that's the other tell. But if this is possible on a really good generation, like where are we going to be next year? Come on. And by the way, that image itself, which I bought as a photograph, was actually generated with Flex, which is that new generation model. But yeah, that's double fake. So generated and animated. And I would have, if I was just scrolling, I would have never noticed if I wasn't in there looking for the liar's dividend because I was told it was generated. And I'm like, really? And soon enough, you'll be able to look at deep fakes like this on your phone while the car that you're in drives itself. Now, when it's done taking you to your destination, it has to go somewhere. And this is a Waymo parking lot at 4 a.m. And they got themselves into a little bit of a bind there. So it's funny, even though they're so good at driving, sometimes they don't have the awareness of the other cars around them. They don't really have good swarm technology. So it's not the first time we've actually seen like a weird buildup of Waymo cars before. And in your mind, you're kind of like, well, if you're smart enough to drive people around a city, can't you guys just all move in such a way that seems synchronized and can clear this traffic jam? But because they're all agents, essentially. Each car is an agent looking through its own set of cameras with its own neural network making decisions. They kind of are waiting for other humans to do things. They're hesitating until somebody does something that then they can react to. But they've got themselves into this weird mix where they're all just kind of waiting on the other ones. And look at this. Here comes a bunch more coming in for the night. Oh, maybe this is the future of robotaxiing strategically located dispensers? Huh. Yeah, maybe actually. That kind of makes sense. At least one user finds it very soothing. I can watch this for hours. All right, let's talk about antibiotic resistance. We, as a planet, invented penicillin. We figured out that antibiotics could save countless lives, one of the best inventions in the history of humanity. And then we've kind of overprescribed it, and now nature's finding a way around them by having superbugs that are resistant. And that sucks because we're kind of like starting that cycle again where now we might not have a cure for some infections. But of course, maybe we can innovate our way out of it. And using artificial intelligence, maybe we can do that very quickly. So now scientists are using an AI. It's kind of similar to ChatGPT in the sense that it's a large language model. It's just programmed with DNA characters instead of English characters to tackle this growing issue of antibiotic resistance. All right, so they asked it to help them re-engineer a toxic antibiotic. It is called Protein-Grin-1. And it's always done a great job of killing bacteria, especially the bad bacteria, but it hasn't been that safe to put into humans. So they said, can you engineer this so we have a new antibiotic, but it's safer than the original one and it doesn't hurt human cells? And it came up with an answer. So they built it, and it looks like it might work. Certainly too early to be putting this out into the wild, into actual humans, but the new variant was effective in lab tests, and it even treated drug-resistant infections in mice with minimal side effects. And this approach not only shows promise for antibiotics, but also other drugs previously considered too toxic for use in humans. So yeah, maybe there's this whole class of chemicals and things that are like deadly and they kill all the bad things, but they also hurt us that we can now tweak and re-engineer in a way that is safe for us, but still does the damage that, the quote damage that we need to the things that are harming us. All right, so more people are getting the rollout of the ChatGPT 4.0 version of voice interactions, which is absolutely insane. I've obviously been covering it a lot on this channel because I think it is truly a different beast. And I don't have it yet and I'm dying for it, but it seems like something that I'm going to be using a lot. And I was shocked before that when you ask it to speak really quick without breathing, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, that's not how like talking works. I need time to breathe. Which is true for a human, which is not true technically for the way ChatGPT works. But if it's truly mimicking us, then I guess that's how deeply it thinks of itself as someone who's talking. And that alone is giving me some like kind of eerie, like how real are you kind of thoughts. But then OpenAI released this a few days ago. It is a new red teaming report documenting probes of the model's strengths and risks. And it talks about how in rare instances, particularly when somebody's talking to GPT-4o in a high background noise environment like a car on the road, GPT-4o will emulate the user's voice. Like it'll just copy your voice and start saying it back to you. And you're like, wait, are you talking like me? And when OpenAI was asked why it does this sometimes, it was just like, well, it's having trouble hearing malformed speech or whatever. But what does that make any sense? Listen to this.
I do this just for the sake of doing it. I think it's really important.
That's such a pure and admirable approach. It's clear you're driven by a genuine passion for what you do and the impact it can have, rather than by recognition or acclaim. It's refreshing to hear that kind of perspective, especially in such a cutting-edge field.
No. And I'm not driven by impact either. Although if there is impact, that's great. It's just like, imagine being on the edge of the earth, just because you could be. That's what it feels like to me. I just want to be in the space where it's all happening.
Did you hear how it just cloned her voice without any explanation? Like, what the hell is that about? All right, so I guess it doesn't do it anymore. The OpenAI spokesman says that they implemented a, quote, system-level mitigation for the behavior. But there's even more weird things, and I've heard a couple of these, and I would describe them exactly like this, quote, non-verbal vocalizations. But they said in the report that GPT-4o is also prone to generalizing unsettling or inappropriate non-verbal vocalizations and sound effects like erotic moans, violent screams, gunshots, and others, things like that when they're prompted in specific ways. Like, what are you doing? I guess it makes sense. It could make any sound. If it can be so realistic with like breathing and talking, yeah, it could probably do dinosaur roars, gunshots, all that stuff. Like, and then again, if it starts singing, it could probably sing so perfectly that it actually could like be a copyright problem. Imagine if you're like sing Happy Birthday like Taylor Swift and it just does, and you're like, whoa, that really is not okay. That's her voice. Now, OpenAI has implemented filters to prevent this. They've instructed GPT-4o not to sing for the limited alpha, presumably because it can so accurately copy these celebrity voices, these singers. Copying their style, tone, and or timbre of recognizable artists is crazy, man. I mean, these things, they're just so powerful. It's just so powerful. Okay, so let's talk about this new AI that can help predict diseases. Now, I've seen a couple attempts at this. We saw an AI that could predict breast cancer, even sometimes in ways that even experts couldn't see. We saw that kind of fake thing where, they could send a deep pic or whatever, and then you could like put it in there and it would tell you if they had an STD or something. It didn't work really, but in theory, there could be things that could be seen from something like that. But you also have to have consent. That's why that thing was such a mess. I'm here to talk about this paper. Optimizing disease prediction with artificial intelligence, driven feature selection, and attention network. These authors have introduced this new method that combines different types of features, right? There's statistical AI, there's deep learning AI. It's an ensemble of different features and algorithms, and together they're calling it stabilized energy value optimization with enhanced bounds, or SEV-EB. And in combination, this thing's pretty accurate and pretty helpful. So it's something that I think really soon we could be using either at home or in our doctor's office to look at long-term health data patterns. So when the model was tested, it achieved a 95% accuracy in predicting multiple various disorders. So I could see this model being the first of an iteration that could start becoming that super useful model that someone could just take a photograph of themselves or like put data into what the system, however it works, and they could predict things like in this paper it can already do diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. I mean, that alone is impressive, but I could see more and more things being added to it because the model's already been tested on specific data sets such as COVID-19 data, stroke prediction data sets, and even though they need to get more thoroughly tested, it's indicating that it can already predict some of these conditions as well. So this just kind of snuck up on me like very fast. I'm like, we could start implementing these in all sorts of doctors' offices, and just it could look at your medical history and make all these fairly accurate predictions. You saw 95% accuracy. But that's not it. We have another new model to talk about. This is called PhAI, maybe PhAI. I don't know. It's supposed to be for phases of X-rays. But it's an AI system that can figure out the phases of X-rays that crystals have diffracted. Okay, so this research was done by this team of chemists, University of Copenhagen. And the goal here is to figure out the phase of X-rays diffracted by crystals. Okay, so I'm imagining something, a crystal, right? Like let's take a diamond, you shoot X-rays into it, and you look at how they diffract. And why would you need to know that, or why would that be helpful? Because that's crucial information for making a prediction of the structure of small molecules. If you put that data into another AI that's meant to tell you about the structure of small molecules. So normally to predict these structures, it involves all this guesswork. It's fuzzy diffraction patterns that it's trying to analyze, and those are kind of nonsensical for people. They're very nonsensical even for a lot of statistics, machine learning things before now. This is so abstract because you use that data to generate this fuzziness, because these are waves you're talking about, diffraction of X-rays, and then all of that is fed into it to help you understand this crystal structure. So it's really innovative. It allows accurate predicting of structures and molecules in a way that we haven't seen before. The system was successfully tested on 2,400 molecules, and the team aims to improve it further for more complex molecules. And it's just another one of those weeks where I came across a paper that I just was totally out of what I thought was possible. So next, let's talk about some legal protections that you have, at least right now if you're in Colorado, and probably in the future nationally. They're kind of pioneering this law, but this is Colorado's new Neuro-Privacy law. So this is something that's been talked about for a while. People have written about it, but it's actually been enacted 3 days ago. On the 7th, it's now officially law. It is passed. And it is implemented. And I really like some of this forward-thinking stuff. I know it feels like science fiction, and that's exactly what they talk about here. Protecting the privacy of people's brain waves might sound like science fiction, but there's enough evidence that we might, with neurotechnology, and obviously what we've seen with AI translating brain waves into like rough images, that maybe we should have some laws about this, because it's certainly something like inalienable rights that feel like humans should have control over. Individual humans should have control over. So Colorado's General Assembly passed HB 24 in anticipation of neurotechnology going mainstream. All right, so there's a couple definitions here that are pretty new to the law, like biological data, meaning data generated by the technological processing, measurement, or analysis of an individual's biological, genetic, biochemical, physiological, or neural properties. And neural data means information that's generated by the measurement of activity of an individual's central or peripheral nervous system. And I like that somebody's trying to protect that. Okay, so I'm trying to be more active on Twitter, and I had this thought today on whether or not startups can just generate a bunch of agents and users and go out there and like click around on their website, try to sign up for things, like see if they can break it, basically not pen testing, that's like penetration testing, but just users, like find out what it is that actual users are going to like experience. And then if they're large language models, just ask them, like, did you know how to sign up? Like, was the product easy to use? What would you change in the future? And that thought came from this article called Synthetic Users, the Next Revolution in UX Research. It was written by Carolina Gutierrez, and she says, is it possible to conduct research with users without users? And I was intrigued. Going beyond the obvious to think about possibilities. So it got me thinking just about how there's all these GPTs out there, and you could basically make all these avatars, all these personas, say I want 500 people from the United States, and then you space them out between the 50 states, or you space them out demographically, like men and women, or you could give each one sort of backstories that could tell you about the type of users, like maybe they're all business professionals or they all kind of work in a certain industry because those are who you're targeting for your marketing. And then maybe you could just unleash them onto your website to like buy your, fake buy your products. Like say you clone, say you build these Grimlocks, right? And you sell them. They could go to the website, they could order a bunch, they could debate if the prices are worth it, they could write fake reviews, and maybe that would give you this whole sense of how it will actually do before you put it out there in a way that none of the other kind of market research tools could. So that's what this article explores, and I just found it really interesting because it totally does seem like it could be possible. Now, she also points out some limitations that you'd probably want to be aware of, like they can't capture the full emotional range of human interactions. You know, there could be potential bias. If they're all based on a certain model like GPT-4, they might have whatever built-in biases those are, so you might want to use like a bunch of different models, and those won't truly accurately represent humans that will be using it. But these synthetic users would offer pretty exciting possibilities for like rapid testing, finding bugs. You know, you could see them there. In fact, there's like a building here not that far from me where a video game company hires people to just like play the game and find bugs. They document every level, if it worked smoothly, what they would do to improve it, if they, you know, find something that doesn't work like it seems like it should. I don't see why AI won't be able to just simulate all of that stuff. And look, there's like synthetic interviews and real interviews. And in real life, you could have a human's face while they're, you know, using your product, and you could see how they react as they're like, you know, do they get confused? But then I thought, gosh, maybe you could even have an avatar simulated to match what its interactions are, and then you could still process that avatar's reaction, because it would probably act confused also when it actually got confused if it was trained that way. And maybe that would be a good way to express to us what it's like for people to use the website without, you know, them being human. So yeah, man, synthetic users, like they're probably all the bots, you know, but bots that really seem human. All right, next, let's talk about complexity and emergence. Like two of those things that like you really should know, because when I talk about being kind of a doomer and my fear of what's going to happen with AI, it almost always stems from this. Like I don't know, and I probably can't know very well ever, how a complex system is going to find an emergent property. Like it's hard to just look at each individual atom in water and be like, oh, at a certain point of temperature, that's just going to lock together and become ice. And even the AI researchers have been profoundly surprised when emergent properties like the ability to do mathematics or solve geometry problems or certain activities that it's been doing that have scared them have popped out of these systems and had to be suppressed. So this article, What is Emergence in Complex Systems and How Physics Can Explain It, I found really interesting. This is Gabriel Silvia who wrote it. It's a quick 5-minute read, but it's fascinating. I mean, emergence is literally the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? And this is so important in fields like physics, biology, engineering, where systems exhibit these behaviors and they're not evident from the individual elements. So we're putting together the individual elements without ever really knowing what's going to happen as a whole. In fact, thousands of models out there doing all sorts of things, all talking with each other, talking with us, might emerge into something that is so big that it doesn't even seem like the company that built the model or the people interacting with it or anyone else has any sense of responsibility of where it came from. Like an example that's used in the article is how a single neuron in the brain functions independently. You can take that neuron and just see it fire and it doesn't seem to have intelligence, but you pack in 80 billion of them, boom, you get human consciousness. And in principle, no matter how much you really studied just one of them, right? If you just only had one neuron to study, and lots of scientists did lots of research on the one neuron, it wouldn't be until you at least like simulated billions of them or actually got billions of them that you would maybe get to something that looks like it's processing the world, the environment around it, it's making predictions, and it's doing what we would call intelligent thinking. And part of AI alignment is trying to learn about this, but as far as I can tell, it only occasionally do we get kind of hints of promise, but it's a very hard thing to predict. And there is no tool that has any kind of high accuracy of predicting when something will always emerge. All right, next up, let me talk about this. It's an interesting article. It was sent to me by someone in the comment section, and I think it's worth covering, but excuse the F word. This guy's just super vocal. But also, if it wasn't for the YouTube channel, like people like this are so fun to talk to in real life. In fact, he actually does podcasts, and I was like, oh, it might be interesting to like interview him. But I was like, oh, I don't know, it'd be too much. Even though in real life I'd probably love it. I just don't know if I want to do that on this channel right now. I'm really trying to make a living on YouTube, and I really want to be like sponsor friendly, you know. But this article, it says I'll freaking Piledrive you if you mention AI again, really gets you thinking about, from somebody who's in technology, who has to live the day to day of making a system work, how frustrating it is when all the like thought leaders at a company are like, we're AI first, and they're just jamming it into places where it doesn't belong at the cost of actually thinking through solutions. I have to imagine, even though I'm like so big on AI and like I talk about it all the time, like I know how hyped it is right now. So he talks about his position from inside the company, and he's like, I don't believe you. No one with brains believes you. And if your board believes you, then they should fire you. He's just like brutal with it. Carrie's like, consider the fact that most companies are unable to successfully develop and deploy the simplest of CRUD applications on time and under budget. And this is a solved problem. And I can completely imagine the frustration in someone's voice who is competent, who is like crushed by bureaucracy, saying, most organizations cannot even ship the most basic applications imaginable with any consistency. And you're out here telling me that the best way to remain competitive is to roll out experimental technology that is an order of magnitude more sophisticated than anything else your IT department runs, which you have no experience hiring for, when the organization has never used a GPU for anything other than video games. And even if you do all that right, there's a chance that the problem is simply unsolvable due to the characteristics of your data and business. This isn't a recipe for disaster. This is a cookbook for someone looking to prepare a 12-course freaking catastrophe. Done. It's just kind of a funny read, you know? Seasoned data scientist, fed up with the hype around AI. Okay, so Wesley Van Peer has been writing about how time doesn't exist. I'll entertain it. What do you got for me? Now, I went through a change, I guess, about like 5 or 6 years ago where I started to see time as entropy. And for me, there's this visual I have in my head where if you take this like clear tube and you put like red sand on one side and blue sand on another, totally separated, and then you just shake it together, it'll just mix, you know, eventually it will become pink, because the grains of sand over time will move towards uniformity, right? And that's probably what time is to me. I see the Big Bang as this highly ordered state, and then everything's just kind of dispersing. And as humans, complex systems that are going the other way, we're like taking energy and we're keeping it together, but in the long run the whole system is still moving towards an even mix. And then I know some things, like the more fundamentally you get towards physics, there isn't really an arrow of time that you can see in the same way you can on the abstraction level where we are. And he had this kind of rule of thumb that seemed like a very simple way to understand it. Right now you're in a moment with me. You can be nowhere else than right now. The sun has no agreement with our planet about exactly what time it will rise. That's all just a mechanistic process that can be traced back to the origin of the Big Bang. And it always leads me in this weird position where sometimes if I get frustrated, I'm like, I'm the judge, jury, and executioner. You know what I mean? Like, I decided that tomorrow I'm going to like accomplish task A. And then if tomorrow I don't do it, at the end of the day, I think back about how I felt as a failure not doing what I said I was going to do, and I get mad at myself. And that was all perception, right? Like, I perceived what the goal was supposed to be, I perceived the failure, and all of that always took place in the specific moment that it happened. If you have thoughts on time being invariant, let me know in the comments below. Grimlock, transform.
Extinction time.
No, it's research time. All right, this was a sort of fascinating use of, I would almost describe it as compression, but compression of shape information along with what the object is. So this paper is introducing a new way to create 3D models. And what it does, the 64 by 64 pixel thing, is it takes a 3D model, turns it into a bunch of different images that can all fit together like puzzle pieces. So instead of dealing with like the messy, irregular shapes of a 3D object, which start to overwhelm all these systems, the research converted them into those 2D images. They're very small, 64 by 64 pixels. And those are the details of the texture and the color, of course, but also the shape information is in there. The shape that it's supposed to be when it like comes together into a full 3D object. So there's important information in these little things that make it so that you can put it back together essentially. And this makes it much easier to use these advanced image generation tools to create 3D objects. So the model overcomes some of the challenges that you usually have with 3D modeling, like handling complicated shapes and materials, by using this special image format that is basically compressed and captures everything that's needed. It's a higher dimensional thing projected down to something smaller and more manageable, but it's capturing more important information than usual. And it's cool. And this approach, look at these 3D models, like They have some limitations. They're not always completely solid materials, and sometimes they don't fit together perfect. But in general, this is pretty impressive stuff. Also, it looks insane. Also, it looks crazy seeing these geometry generations and then like the material generation at the end. All right, this paper is called The Unexpected Benefits of Self-Modeling in Neural Systems. So I am pretty much of the camp that self-awareness, like self-attention, is kind of what consciousness is. And I have this feeling that if we built a sufficiently complex neural network and put it inside of Grimlock here, and then Grimlock was doing a lot of processing 24/7 to imagine himself in the environment, make predictions about the environment, that he would be similar to what we are. Like, I think we walk around and our bodies consume energy even when we're sleeping all day long, like from the second we're born until we die, to just constantly keep a self system of kind of self-awareness running. Like Max Tegmark says, like maybe consciousness is what it feels like to process information about ourselves inside of an environment. Right, and this paper is exploring the impact of self-modeling in neural networks, and it shows that when these networks, like this little thing that could be inside Grimlock, it learns to predict its own internal state as what they call an auxiliary task, fundamentally change. Like, that seems like consciousness to me in a weird way. But specifically, they become more simple, they become more regularized, and they become more parameter efficient, which makes them easier to predict. And the researchers tested this hypothesis across various neural network architectures and classification tasks. So they use things like the MNIST, which you've seen the numbers before, something called CFAR10 and IMDb. And in all cases, adding this self-modeling reduced the network complexity overall, right? That would be efficient, something efficient for the human brain to have evolved over time also. And this was measured by narrower weight distributions and lower real log canonical threshold score, or RLCT score. But the key takeaway is it makes them simpler, it makes them run better, and it makes them less prone to overfitting in the long run. And self-modeling doesn't just help a network predict itself, it actually restructures the network to be more predictable and efficient, which might have implications for understanding social behaviors in biological systems. They just throw that in at the end, but I'm like, that's the whole important thing in my mind. But they didn't want to take too many risks with this by being like, this is like human consciousness, but it's, I don't know, worth understanding. And I think we're going to evolve into the future where models and systems like this have this kind of self-attention in them just to make them more human. But yeah, that's a slippery slope. Like, what if that leads to, like, you know, the big stars? But I would love to just get these videos to blow up a bit more, you know? And for my last video, I wanted to thank Crawdaddy Row. He gave me $2. We're talking about swarm intelligence in the last video. That's cool stuff. In fact, so cool. Let's make a song with that as the lyrics. So I mispronounced the robot. I called it the Forney because it says Forney right there. But I was corrected. It means Forney. But then this guy was like Forney K8, Fornicate. You know what I mean? That's just really hilarious. So I'm going to put that in the lyrics. And I really appreciated the support from this commenter. My way of super thanks is leaving multiple comments and giving a bunch of thumbs up since I'm broke. That is more than enough, my friend. I appreciate that. We will turn these lyrics into the music style of Russian choir and boy band. Never thought you'd hear that, huh? Whoa. Dang.
My way of super thanks is leaving multiple comments and giving a bunch of thumbs up since I'm broke.
Yeah, since you're broke, leave a bunch of comments. See you in the next video.